Hello. Well, I'd like to say I jumped across that, but actually there's a bridge, so I didn't have to bother. This is chapter 20, where it's the 7th of July. The flight in the heather, the rocks. Sometimes we walked, sometimes ran, and as it drew on to morning, walked ever the less and ran the more. Though upon its face that country appeared to be a desert, yet there were huts and houses of the people, of which we must have passed more than 20, hidden in quiet places of the hills. When we came to one of these, Alan would leave me in the way, and go himself and rap upon the side of the house, and speak, while at the window with some sleeper awakened. This was to pass the news, which in that country was so much of a duty, that Alan must pause to attend to it, even while fleeing for his life. And so well attended to by others, that in more than half of the houses where we called, they had already heard of the murder. In the others, as well as I could make out, standing back at a distance and hearing a strange tongue, the news was received with more of consternation than surprise. For all our hurry, day began to come in while we were still far from any shelter. It found us in a prodigious valley, strewn with rocks, and where ran a foaming river. Wild mountains stood around it. There grew there neither grass nor trees, and I have sometimes thought since then that it may have been the valley called Glencoe, where the massacre was in the time of King William. But for the details of our itinerary, I am all to seek. Our way, lying now by shortcuts, now by great detours, our pace being so hurried, our time of journeying usually by night, well, I'm not doing that, especially around here, too dangerous, and the names of such places I asked and heard being in the Gaelic tongue and the more easily forgotten. The first peep of morning then showed us this horrible place, and I could see Alan knit his brow. "This is no fit place for you and me," he said. "This is a place they're bound to watch." And with that he ran harder than ever down to the waterside, and in a part where the river was split in two among 3 rocks, it went through with a horrid thundering that made my belly quake, and there hung over the linn a little mist of spray. Alan looked neither to the right nor to the left, but jumped clean upon the middle rock, and fell there on his hands and knees to check himself, for that rock was small, and he might have pitched over on the far side. I had scarce time to measure the distance or to understand the peril before I had followed him, and he had caught and stopped me. So there we stood, side by side upon a small rock, slippery with spray, a far broader leap in front of us, and the river dinning upon all sides. When I saw where I was, there came on me a deadly sickness of fear, and I put my hand over my eyes. Alan took me and shook me. I saw he was speaking, but the roaring of the falls and the trouble of my mind prevented me from hearing. Only I saw his face was red with anger, and he stamped upon the rock. The same look showed me the water raging by, and the mist hanging in the air, and with that I covered my eyes again and shuddered. The next minute Alan had set the brandy bottle to my lips, and forced me to drink about a gill, which sent the blood into my head again. Then putting his hands to his mouth, and his mouth to my ear, he shouted, "Hang or drown!" and turning his back upon me, leaped over the farther branch of the stream and landed safe. I was now alone upon the rock, which gave me the more room. The brandy was singing in my ears. I had this good example fresh before me, and just wit enough to see that if I did not leap at once, I should never leap at all. I bent low on my knees, and flung myself forth with that kind of anger of despair that has sometimes stood me instead of courage. And sure enough, it was but my hands that reached the full length. These slipped, caught again, slipped again, and I was slithering back into the linn, when Alan seized me first by the hair, then by the collar, and with a great strain, dragged me into safety. Whew. Well, that is why I am not jumping that rock. Never a word, he said, but set off running again for his life, and I must stagger to my feet and run after him. I had been weary before, but now I was sick and bruised and partly drunken with the brandy. I kept stumbling as I ran. I had a stitch that came near to overmaster me, and when at last Alan paused under a great rock that stood there among a number of others, it was none too soon for David Balfour. A great rock, I have said, but by rights it was 2 rocks, leaning together at the top, both some 20 feet high, and at the first sight inaccessible. Even Alan, though you may say he had as good as 4 hands, failed twice in an attempt to climb them. It was only at the 3rd trial, and then by standing on my shoulders and leaping up with such force as I thought must have broken my collarbone, that he secured a lodgment. And once there, he let down his leathern girdle, and with the aid of that and a pair of shallow footholds in the rock, I scrambled up beside him. And then I saw why he had come there. For the two rocks, being both somewhat hollow on the top and sloping one to the other, made a kind of dish or saucer where as many as 3 or 4 men might have lain hidden. And all this while Alan had not said a word, and had run and climbed with such a savage, silent frenzy of hurry that I knew he was in mortal fear of some miscarriage. Even now we were on the rock he said nothing, nor so much as relaxed the frowning look upon his face, but clapped flat down, and keeping only one eye above the edge of our place of shelter, scouted all around the compass. The dawn had come quite clear. We could see the stony sides of the valley and its bottom, which was bestrewed with rocks, and the river which went from one side to another and made white falls, but nowhere the smoke of a house, nor any living creature, but some eagles screaming round a cliff. And then at last Alan smiled. "Aye," said he, "now we have a chance." And then looking at me with some amusement, "You're no very gleg at the jumping," said he. Well, how good at the jumping would you be? Let's just take one final look at that jump, and then maybe we'll go and find this hiding place of the rocks.